Thank you. Welcome to our presentation, Digital Story Video Projects, Planning, Resources, and Support at the U. My name is Scott Spicer. I'm the Media Outreach Learning Spaces Librarian. I'm with the libraries. I head the Library Media Services Program. This is?
I'm Charlie Hines. I'm the Media Services Site Manager in the Smart Learning Commons.
I'm Jack McTeague. I am the OIT Video and Conferencing Service Consultant.
My name is Pete McCauley, and I'm the Principal Media Producer for the College of Education and Human Development. And I feel like we're in a lineup here at the. That's what the beauty of these is. They're wireless. You can walk around. So what we wanted to start off with was just to show one short example of a digital story. And this is an opportunity for us to also showcase this. Is the mouse working on our screen? Am I just not seeing it? Oh, there it is. This great site, which if you're not familiar with this site, this is actually just for the recording. So we'll just try to make sure we're speaking loud enough. This site, if you don't know about the Immigrant Story site, this is an excellent new website that was launched recently by the Immigrant Research and History Center in the College of Liberal Arts. And it is a website that allows you to, for free, you can create your own account on this site and start creating digital stories through their website. And they have tools on there for both writing and creation, as well as they have a blanket license to WeVideo for video editing. And then they also have a gallery that you can contribute your story to at the end if you wish. But it's also totally voluntary. You're not by any means forced to contribute your story, but you could still explore their site. So I'll just play a little bit of this one digital story down here that they have on their site. And I hope that our audio is all set up. We'll find out momentarily, huh? I'll bring it back to the beginning here.
One of Burma's largest ethnic minorities who have been facing persecution. Hi, my name is Cecilia Mo, and my immigration story starts way before I was even born, with the longest ongoing civil war in Myanmar, or as my people call it, Burma. I am Karen, one of Burma's largest ethnic minorities who have been facing persecution from the Burmese government since 1948. My parents were living in Burma near the Thai border, traveling in and out of the country. I was born in Chumphon, Thailand in 1991, and to escape the persecution, we moved to Thailand in 1982, to Mongor, a refugee camp home to about 8,400 Karen refugees near the border in Thailand. All my siblings, except the one born in the U.S., were born in Mongor. Growing up, I was unaware that Mongor was a refugee camp. We lived our lives peacefully there. My sister and I attended school, and my mom worked in the field. One night in March of 1998, the camp was attacked by a combined DKBA-SPDC force. Mortars and grenades were fired, houses were burned, and people were severely injured. Memories of that night will never be forgotten. Dragged by my aunt, I was running barefoot in a creek toward the forest. I was scared and I didn't understand what was going on. I wondered where my mother was and where my other siblings were. I felt relieved when we found the rest of the family. That night was very cold, but only small fires were built to avoid detection. After that night, my family went to stay with my mother's sister in Kisbuklo, a village in Mesa, Thailand, until we moved to Manila Refugee Camp in November of 1999. Moko and Manila were both run by the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees. I was aware that Manila was a refugee camp because we were fenced in and could only go out of the camp on Saturday mornings for the flea market. There were about 2,000 refugees living there. As a child, I had no worries. I attended school and made many friends in the camp. My father's side of the family were also living in the camp. Soon they left for the United States. My family was the last on my father's side to leave the camp. Our destination was St. Paul, Minnesota, because my father's side of the family were already settling there. We loaded onto a Songtail, a truck converted into a two-bench taxi, and left the camp the night of April 1st, 2001. We stayed in Bangkok for 3 days for physical checkups and immunization before we boarded onto our plane to the US. This was the first time any of us had been on a plane. My memory of the plane ride was my sister throwing up and my nose bleeding every time the plane took off or landed due to the air pressure. Our first stop was Tokyo, Japan. From Tokyo, we flew to Los Angeles, landing in our first city in the US. Then, from Los Angeles, we flew to the Minneapolis-St. Paul International Airport, our last stop. Throughout this journey, we guarded with our lives this white IOM bag as it holds important documents. There we were met by my father's side of the family. For the first few months, my family stayed in the basement of First Baptist Church of St. Paul until we got an apartment. During that time, my sister and I stayed with our grandparents to catch the bus to school. We learned the new language in school. It took some time to get used to the new life, but we can call this new place home. Refugee camps were not permanent homes, and they did not assure us our security, so we're very lucky to make it in the United States and be reunited with our family.
So I think this is a really great example of a digital story, also a digital story that's pertinent to a diversity community of practice, of course, because of the story and where she comes from. And also, when you talk about genres of digital stories, this is a good example of what we call the personal narrative style, which has become, in many ways, the most typical type of digital story. But really, when it boils down to it, a digital story at its most basic is really any story that's told using digital media. So, but there has been evolution of practice now that that uses this type of personal narrative story that tends to be the most typical of digital storytelling. But we can also show a couple of quick examples of some other types of digital stories. So I'll go back to the presentation here. How do I get back to my presentation? Oh, is it up at the top? Yep. Right there? Yep. Okay. Great. You want to talk
Yeah,
about
I'll show a case study from a class,
Yeah, that'd be a good one.
a documentary in family social science. If I can.
So we'll also make sure that this slide deck is shared with everybody so that you can access these links after the fact if you wish.
Family social science? Oh, there it is.
Yep. So here's an example of a digital story that was created for a class in Family Social Science, with a department in the College of Education and Human Development. One of our faculty members was fairly active in using these in his class.
And I might just show a couple of minutes of this.
Tonight, we've uncovered women right here in the Twin Cities are being kidnapped and forced into prostitution.
We know it stretches across several states, and there could be as many as 40 suspects, all connected to Somalian gangs. And the whole operation is headquartered right here in the Twin Cities.
We are seeing sixth and seventh, eighth graders who are aspiring to be strippers now, because every pop video, that whole hip hop culture and the whole pimp and hoe culture is very much mainstream now. We're normalized to it. So when you have, daytime TV people advocating putting stripping poles in your house for exercise, you have, stay-at-home moms doing this kind of stuff as exercise, and their children are watching this, what does that say? I did a presentation out in Woodbury, and everyone's done, one woman got up and said, all the kids out here had a big party last weekend because one of the parents was gone, and that was the theme. It was a pink and home party.
Okay. So that's a course integrated student video assignment project example.
Okay, so there are just kind of a couple of examples. Now, of course, digital stories can be any number of different things, right? I mean, one that we're all very familiar with is This American Life. It's a good example of strictly audio, but it still is a digital story, especially considered that it is distributed digitally these days. Some other digital stories that you might not think about are something like PDF, that's like a comic book that's turned into a PDF and then distributed digitally as well. So any digital stories don't necessarily have to be a video, but most times they are. Just typically that's the most common way of distributing them. But there are as many different kinds of digital stories as there are different ideas to be communicated. So that's just one thing to keep in mind as we move forward through the presentation. So with that in mind, we were going to talk a little bit about the vision for a digital story or for your video. And from what I understand, this group is very interested in creating videos around these different topics about diversity. And so Scott has an activity that I believe everybody's going to jump into and do a little bit.
Spend like 5 minutes just to get you kind of thinking about a video. If you flip your paper over, and I'm sorry I printed out weird, you'll see there's some 4 questions on the video. And if you just pair up with somebody next to you, or if you just want to work alone, that's fine. But I want to give you about 5 minutes to sort of look at the questions on the sheet. I should actually have it in front of me as well. But basically, just sort of walking you through this process, the pre-production, production, post-production, distribution. Even if you don't have a video in mind that's ready to go right now, this is just a little exercise to kind of get your mindset thinking about a hypothetical or a prospective video that you might want to create.
And we'll be getting into these different stages a little more in depth as far as descriptions of each. But I mean, for at least for a rough guide, pre-production is really just coming up with ideas, doing a little bit of preparation, production being the actual recording and editing, post-production being more on the editing side, but gathering of assets and all the kinds of things. And then, of course, distribution would be whether you're going to share it on YouTube, Vimeo, or other. So feel free to jot down a few notes, and then we will start breaking down into these different steps further as we move forward.
So there you go.
And if anybody has any questions, feel free to shout it out.
Scott, did you think that we would kind of float around and talk to people about it?
No, I'm just going to give them 5 minutes to talk. It's good.
I got out of the way. It was a little crowded. Camera's right there. We're all happy in the city. We're thinking we could just pull it out. It seems like it's been a little while since we've been talking a lot. We could say let's take a quick tour up to the one by the studio. Connects well with the production part of it.
Yeah, that might be good. That might be a good time to do that. Yeah.
What's that?
Getting them a chance to stretch their legs, go up to the one button studio when we're talking about production.
Rather than
Yeah.
finishing?
Of course, we don't
No.
have much time.
Well, but I got to leave at 4, so.
Right.
So I was.
So we'll just watch the time, and if it's, if we've just been talking a lot.
I think it's fine.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not that long of a presentation.
Yeah. It was a good idea, I think. Yeah.
Let's just do center folks and get them in that mindset. And so you're up next, Jack. I know. Pete. I know. It's fine. I don't even know if we're gonna. I don't think we're gonna share out. Hey Pete, you're up next. We're just gonna give you guys another minute or two, and then we'll continue on. Oh, you said it? Okay. It's up to you, Pete. Whenever you want to bring it back. Is it? Oh, dude. Oh, shoot. Okay. That's like.
So does that seem, does everybody have a chance to kind of just get a few ideas down? What we'll do is we'll talk a little more about those different stages and talk a little bit more about storytelling later. But what I wanted to do was point out right away, up front, I wanted to talk a little bit about engagement. I've been doing a little bit of research recently into engagement as far as especially students when it comes to video content in courses. And I have some links on the slide as well to a couple of articles that talk about this. But what we know right now is that shorter videos are really the most engaging, up to about 3 minutes. That seems to be kind of the real target zone when you're creating an online video. There you go. It helps if the microphone is on. So yeah, the shorter videos are more engaging, generally up to about 3 minutes. That's where you get the most people who are viewing the entire content. Then it drops off, and depending on the connections to your content, now, talking a lot about course content here, but if your content is specific to something that people are working through, maybe it's a workshop, whatever, you can get away with having a little bit longer videos. And it seems like the sweet spot is somewhere around 6 to 10 minutes, right? So if the content that you're sharing is very almost like required for a course or very specific to the audience that you're dealing with, that 6 to 10 minutes will still retain a certain amount of engagement. But then once you get past about 10 minutes, it really falls off, and different studies have different fall-off points. This one is actually quite favorable. It only drops down to 50. Some of the other studies, they're gone. It's all the way down to like 0. So you want to think about length, all right? And depending on your content too, if it doesn't make sense to have your video just be 3 minutes long, you could potentially divide it up into several 3-minute segments, okay? That's always something that can be done. So quality, tone, and visuals, of course, matter. So you want to be trying to, have a goal of the highest production quality possible, which is one of the reasons why we're here today and why you get a chance to talk to people like us. The tone, of course, being kind of your overall tone, whether it's conversational or very formal. It sounds like from the research a lot more students or audience will engage with the content if it's more of a casual conversational tone. And then, of course, visuals as well. So you want to make sure that you're taking into account what it is that everybody's looking at during the time frame. So, and again, like I said before, the longer form content, such as a lecture, could be broken up into shorter segments. So even if you're doing an interview with an expert and you want to be able to share all of their 20-minute video, you could cut that up into 3 5-minute segments or 5 3-minute segments, etc. But of course, that requires editing, which hopefully after today, everybody will be experts at editing, right? So really, the benefit of being a part of this university is that there are a lot of people like us who you can consult with if you have questions and if you have projects that you would like to take on. All right. So most of the consultation here at the university is dependent upon either college or unit. So, for example, I'm part of the College of Education and Human Development, and I'm with a group that's called Digital Education and Innovation. We are primarily tasked to serve instructors and faculty who want to use technology for teaching. And so my role in that group is to serve faculty and instructors who want to use video or media for their courses. But that doesn't mean that anybody else in my college can't come and ask me about media-related stuff. Or even somebody else outside of the college. I'm more than happy to sit down, especially if somebody wants to buy me a cup of coffee, right? We get together over lunch and we can talk about media projects. And so there's me and my team. In CLA, there's the Lattice Group, which is Liberal Arts Technology Integration Services. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Or Technology and Information Services, something like that. Anyway, if you're in CLA, Lattice has a staff of people that are there to help you with projects. And then there are a lot of other groups here at the university, such as Library Media Services, which Scott and Charlie are
I
part
work
of.
with faculty across campus to develop and support student-produced media assignments. And Charlie,
We mostly work with undergraduates, but we'll help out
in the Smart Learning Commons on-site.
We also, here at the university, we have the Academic Technology Support Services Group, which is based here in Walter, and they are similar to the group that I work with in that they help faculty and instructors use technology for teaching, but they serve the entire university, and they also have video-specific staff there, and I know that they'd be more than happy to consult. And then Jack can maybe talk a little bit about OIT video as well.
You want to talk about OIT video? Yep. So with our services, there are a few different platforms that you can use to host your content. WebEx for web conferencing, YouTube for putting up videos, Kaltura for putting up videos for classing, teaching, learning. And so we have a whole bunch of different services like those where you can use video. And my role is to help you engage with those services. In addition to what Pete was talking about just any old video project that you're looking to do, I'm also there. I'm a former video producer, so I know a lot of the technology and the terminology and whatnot. So my expertise is available for you to use as well. So.
And I should mention, we also consult on a wide range of different media resources and different media projects as well.
So we kind of feel like, especially to represent ourselves here, it's important to mention that we are here to consult with you, whether you can find us internally to your college or unit, or whether you want to just get in touch with us after this presentation as a result of today's chat. The beauty of having people here on staff at the university with this expertise is that we can help point you in the right direction for resources, and we could also help you to potentially think about how you want to present your content. You may be thinking of it in one way, but once get a chance to sit down and have a conversation, we may find that, this might be really better off as a audio piece, or maybe it's a podcast or something like that. So taking the time to consult with folks like us can really bring about a lot of benefits for your end result. So there's that slide.
This is a blank slide, but just wanted to make one mention about event capture as well. So adding to the WebEx and YouTube services that we have, we also have some services where you can hire a tech to come out and do some event capture. Either it's recording or it's broadcasting live. That's one area that I know a few of your colleagues may have used in some lectures along the way. It's a great way to, if you have a lecture, a guest lecture, or a panel coming to talk to your community, it's a great way to record that, for archival purposes, but then also reach out to the community at large. So. Yeah. Yeah, there is cost if you want to hire someone to come out and actually run it for you. There's a hourly charge for that. But if you're just looking for like consultative services and kind of point you in the right direction as to what you can use, we have my time is free. So equipment, we will get into that. We'll add in the resources on that. So so this part we're going to start getting into now. The 4 steps that you will take along your journey to creating a video. So this image kind of talks a little bit about what you will be doing. So there's, like we had mentioned, there's pre-production, production, post-production, and distribution. So we'll kind of cover all those things. So in pre-production, let's see what we wrote down here. Really, this step is like one of the most crucial elements to any production, because it's when you are going to really start to firm up your idea and start scheduling and plotting out kind of what your objective is. So questions up here such as, is this going to be, what type of medium you're going to be using? Is this going to be an interview? Are you going to find some cool animations to use? Are you going to include some graphics? You'll start identifying what type of equipment you need to use, where you're going to start filming. A lot of these crucial questions that any great idea will not come to fruition without answering a lot of these questions. So it's kind of like figuring out what you're going to do, and then really just going out and doing it. But I would really, a lot of times you can get into a section where you're just overdeveloping or overthinking certain things. So at some point you do have to put it away and start hitting the track. But it's always important to just kind of go through this list of questions and start figuring out what you want to do.
So actually, let's go back. I just want to comment a little on that last slide. So oftentimes when I sit down with folks in the college who want to do video projects, these are kind of the questions that I do with what I call my intake interview. So I'll sit down with them, we'll talk about the project, and I'll ask a lot of these questions to kind of get a sense of what they want. And sometimes they just have 1 or 2 answers to these, and then I help them to come up with the other answers. So again, that's another benefit to being able to take advantage of the consultative services that we have here at the university. So these are very much a kind of questions step by step for this production process. But then there's also the element of writing and coming up with the story itself, right? And there's an interesting, I guess it would be a technique for developing stories that there's a place called Story Center out in California, and they have been credited a lot with being kind of on the pioneering front of digital storytelling. Some people have gone as far as to say that they invented digital storytelling, which is kind of like saying, Ford invented the wheel, right? But so Story Center has a really interesting model that they call story circles, right? And I think this is the thing that's kind of their biggest contribution to this practice, is that The story circle approach is they have people get together and everybody tells their story that they want to turn into a digital story to their circle, so to the rest of the people in this group. And then everybody gives feedback, and there's usually some specific rules about making sure it's all positive feedback. And then everybody goes around the circle, shares their story, and gets the feedback from everybody else. So this is kind of a method of being able to refine that story. But in reality, it's really hard to really nail down what a good story is. And I think one of the things we would be remiss if we didn't talk a little bit about storytelling if we're talking about digital storytelling. So the drawback to this presentation is that none of the four of us standing up here are expert storytellers, right? We usually are working with somebody else that has the idea or the story to bring it to life in a digital format. But there is a lot of research out there about storytelling, and here's an example of kind of your typical story arc process where you've got the establishment at the beginning in Act 1, the rising action and conflict in the middle, and then of course the climax and denouement at the end. Now, certainly you don't have to stick to this particular format. There's always ways to tell a story that utilizes these different elements but in a different order, that kind of thing. So if you would like to get more support in your actual storytelling part of it, there are a lot of resources out there. And of course, one of the ones that I would recommend is we have a faculty member in the College of Ed, Linda Buturian, who published a great ebook, which is free, called The Changing Story. Talks a lot about digital storytelling. I'll make sure, I have the link in the references section of the presentation. So
Pete, this might be a good time to also mention the course.
that's right, and I have the link to that as well. Scott and I contributed to a free online course about using digital storytelling in your classrooms, and so we have a lot of resources in there as well. Again, the links are at the end of the presentation. So anyway, this is an image that I got online that I think is just a great representation of that typical story arc, but something to think about as you're generating your ideas for digital stories. So this is where we're going to talk a little bit about resources, and maybe what we'll do is in maybe about 10 minutes or so we'll take a break so everybody can stretch their legs a bit. But does anybody want to?
Yeah, I don't know who's on this one.
It's going to be I think we have Jack on this one.
So some of the resources that we have on campus, we are a lot of the local departments have a lot. It depends on where you are, really, is the big question. If your department has resources, highly recommend reaching out to them and seeing what resources are available to you before you start going out and asking for resources elsewhere. The problem with that is that there is no prescribed set of resources that everyone should have. It's different all the time. So here are a few resources that we have here on campus that you could utilize that are open for pretty much anyone, with a few exceptions. The first place that you can look at it for doing some productions are the resources that OIT has made available to you. One is there is some controlled studios that we have. One is called the One Button Studio, which we might have a chance to go and take a look at the end of the presentation. It's a space, there's one here in Walter. It's a controlled space with noise treatment, camera, light, audio, all set up ready for you to go and do a recording. And it's free to use. You just book it online and go in and you can do a recording. There are some limitations. It's very much prescribed. It's got a very established look, feel, but you walk away with a video recording with nice professional audio and lighting. It meets a good chunk of what people might need for a video. If you're looking for a little bit more of a step up where you're going to be bringing your own equipment to do some recording, we have a space called Studio C, which is in Rarig. It's a free-to-use space. It's got acoustic paneling and a whole host of outlets and everything for your production need. A lot of people in the a lot of production groups on campus will go there and use it. Yep, like Pete, and even students will go out and use it. So it gets quite a bit of usage, but it's not exploding in usage. So you definitely can go in there and book it and take a look at it. As far as other places to record, your conference room is a good place to do recordings. Your office might be a good place to do recording. The problem with going into uncontrolled spaces is that you can run into issues like lighting issues or sound issues. I know HVAC is always a problem. We deal with it all the time in the studio spaces. But you could also go outside of your walls and go. We're lucky to be right at the very beginning of summer in this beautiful campus, so you can go out and film in some of these really amazing spots. You just run into some issues, like I said, about sound and lighting. That's really the biggest trick with that. So as far as equipment, like I mentioned, you can definitely bring your own devices. But then there are some places that you could reach out to. One being the Smart Learning Commons.
Yeah, I think we're going to go into that a little bit more on the
Yep.
next slide.
So we'll cover that a little bit more. And then the IHRC platform has some editing technology that you can utilize. We mentioned WeVideo. And then there's also, outside of the university, there's some public access resources that you could look at. I know that SPNN, St. Paul News Network, or Neighborhood Network, just across 280. They have producers that you can work with and coordinate with. Or you can reach out and look for some videographers. Videographers, if you've not worked with them before, it's always highly recommended to reach out to a consultant first, and just so they can kind of break it down for you and help you understand the costs and things. But if you're familiar with a videographer, definitely reach out to them and set it up. This is a great place to tell stories, and I know videographers here like doing that for that. So.
And I know on campus now there's a printing service has gotten into this a little bit and can provide some higher level videography services from my understanding, although I'm not familiar with the details. And I think we have a link to their services.
So as Jack mentioned, we have equipment in the Smart Learning Commons. We have a modest loaner pool, and it's primarily I think focused on undergraduates trying to produce a digital story or video investigation. But it's it's available to any U of M affiliate. And this is for when you're going out to an uncontrolled environment, like Jack mentioned. So you want to go out and interview someone in their office, or get a panning shot of a building related to your story or something like that. We have HD camcorders, tripods, audio recorders, microphones, external hard drives. Most of this equipment is one-day loan, and that's just because we're trying to balance all of the priorities. And I would highly recommend that you get your requests in early, just because our peak times for class projects is typically November, December, and April, May. But if you get those in early, then we can try to do our best to accommodate and balance things out. Our student media consultants in the Smart Learning Commons, they're trained on the equipment, and they can give you a quick demo of how it works. It's really intended to be easy, because our clientele are not videographers. They're beginners that are learning how to tell a digital story. And then I'm also available by appointment, but again, this is after you've sought out the resources in your collegial unit or department. If you don't have someone to meet with, I'd be happy to meet with you to talk about equipment.
So this is just a little bit more about the One Button Studio. I'll bypass this because we're going to actually go check it out so you can take a look at it.
So I'll mention, in addition to creating your own original, what we call assets in the video business, or your own stuff that you're going to put into your video, you also want to you might be repurposing some other content. Well, I mean, so some of the things you want to consider, of course, who's going to film, and that's fine. External, we already mentioned that, you know, yourself or if somebody's going to film you. But you might also want to consider using stock content now. OIT has been generous enough to license access to video blocks, music and audio blocks, as well as, what is it, photo, I'm trying to think of the third, graphic stock. Sort of stock image, audio, and video, and at least the students, I can speak for the students, use the audio blocks all the time for those nice soundtracks. A lot of, if you listen to them, a lot of the soundtracks you hear on professional recordings come from that database, and we license that material specifically for all kinds of projects, and you could reuse them. You don't have to ask too much permission for copyright or anything like that. In addition, University Relations has an image audio gallery. And then we're not going to get into copyright here too much. It's something I do provide guidance to the campus on with Nancy Sims occasionally with media. But there are, in addition to this, a lot of Creative Commons and other types of media out there that, you know, you could repurpose, as you saw some in the student video project, to tell your story. This is you.
Okay, so timeline and distribution. So that's always another important part of the intake conversation when I'm sitting down with people to talk about projects is what is your timeline? Because that obviously affects everything else. We usually try to figure out when something needs to be finished and then backdate all of the, whether it's post-production, recording, and everything else to meet that. Oftentimes, of course, here at the university, with things being the way they are, we like to try to have a little bit longer time to get things done because it's not always easy to get everybody on board within a short time frame. But you need to consider time needed to like schedule people and weather considerations. A couple of years ago, we were creating a video for the college, and we had a drone shot planned for out in front of Burton Hall towards the end of April, and sure enough, the day we showed up with all of our equipment, it was snowing. And then so we had to wait a week, and then it was beautifully sunny with flowers popping out everywhere. So yeah, scheduling people is really kind of the biggest thing. As a matter of fact, project I'm working on right now with one of our departments, we're scheduling people, faculty, alumni, and folks in the field. And we were hoping we would be able to get it all in within 6 weeks, and it's taken about 12 weeks to get everybody scheduled. So it certainly can be a time-consuming thing. Thinking about how long your video would be, we talked about the engagement lengths, you know, but if you're thinking about how long will it take to produce those, there are some kind of rough guides that you could use. We're talking about generally it might take about 10 hours to go into a finished minute of video. That's kind of a high concept video production if you're using a lot of graphics and titles and B-roll and music. Obviously, if you're just creating a minute of somebody talking, it's not going to take 10 hours to create it. So, but then lower barrier, I think this is Scott's thing, 1 to 3 hours into one finished minute, right, which is what I mentioned.
Yeah, if it's a talking head, or, you know, if you're even just doing some really light digital story, low barrier kind of stuff,
Right.
then it might just be between 1 and 3 hours per minute.
So
really
as
depends.
it's kind of a rough guide to think about, like, well, I want to make about a 3-minute video, so it may take you about 3 days or more to produce that video, all things considered, okay? And then distribution, there obviously are a lot of great distribution platforms, with the university being a Google community now and a Google campus. We have the YouTube license. Everybody on campus has a YouTube account associated with their U of M email account. And so that's one way to distribute. You can also share with other people within the university sphere channels on YouTube, and so that's another thing to consider. Kaltura is the back-end system for most of the courses. So with Moodle and Canvas, Kaltura is where the videos live, and then they also are usually played through Kaltura. There's also, Vimeo is another option. You can even store videos right in Google Drive and share them from there. Then, of course, so there's storage versus sharing. So videos on Google Drive, videos in Dropbox. And then accessibility is, of course, another consideration as well. And one nice thing is that YouTube does automatically caption everything with using a speech recognition software. It's not the best software in the world. Sometimes it doesn't always capture everything properly. But it does give you tools as a user to be able to upload a transcript, and it will time that transcript out. And so there are a lot of ways to be able to do captioning that are low barrier as far as complexity. Yeah.
I just wanted to add, I'm from the Disability Resource
Yeah, I
Center.
was gonna
We
mention.
have a media and captioning unit,
So I have other.
Exactly.
Sorry, my apologies. Go ahead.
Oh, yeah, by all means, I would encourage you to contact us because the YouTube captions, we often call them craptions.
Right.
because they
Yep.
So on your guide, I have a link to, I think, Emily Paul, who I work with quite a bit, as well as the captioning tutorial on the accessibility at umn.edu tutorial. And I strongly recommend that, as you were suggesting, that you sync your transcript. And
As opposed to using the auto-generated captions.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Question.
it's critically important.
Oh, about just right. It's not called Disability Services anymore. It's called Disability Resource Center. Okay, yes, right. The Disability Resource Center, and I know for a fact that if you are an instructor and you have someone in your class that's DHH or other, you can recruit through or you can work through DRC to be able to get all that done as a part of the package.
I recently had a guest scholar that I wanted to caption his talk that was going out to everywhere. And unfortunately, I couldn't get it done for disability resources. I hadn't had a request of a student asking for that to be done. So that's the barrier right now we need to look at is when you want to have it available to all people everywhere, you're going to address requests.
Right. So the question was around being able to get captions made for something that doesn't necessarily fit under the DRC mantra. And a good solution there is there are a number of vendors, but one really good transcription service is an online vendor called rev.com. It's rev.com. And you can send them an audio file or a video file, and they will transcribe the whole thing fairly quickly. It's usually a 24-hour turnaround for up to about 30 minutes for $1 per minute. And then those transcriptions can be dropped into your YouTube, into the YouTube caption tool and automatically synced there. And it works really well. I've been pretty pleased with the automatic syncing in YouTube. Another nice thing about the YouTube caption tool is that if you don't like where a word is showing up, you can go in and tweak it. So as a user in YouTube, you can make some adjustments as far as the captions go. So I've been doing more and more captioning as a just default on all of my productions now, which technically I think is the law. We're supposed to be doing that anyway.
Yes.
But there has been kind of a bit of a mentality up until the last couple of years that, well, this is a big extra step. There's a lot of time involved. But with some of the tools that we have available now, it's starting to take less and less time to do it. And so I'm happy to be able to say that. And so we're offering that and making sure that's part of our workflow. So with any more questions along those lines, we'll be more than happy to answer. But that is, of course, another thing to consider when you're thinking about your timeline from concept to completion of these kind of projects, right, is captioning as well. So what's next? What do we have next in our post-production? All right. Who wants to talk about post-production? All right.
So what is post-production, first of all? It is when you spend a long few hours in a dark hole and not see the sunrise. It's really just taking all of the stuff that you have created and putting it on a timeline and then getting it ready to go out to the world. If you are lucky enough to not have to go through post-production and you're very happy with what you have done during your production phase and you're ready to just go live, by all means do that if you would like. But a lot of you are going to go through post-production. So you're going to have to try and find some resources that you can utilize to help you along that way, and start with your editing experience. So that might be developing graphics. You might be looking to do some voiceover recording. You might be adding some music into the product. And so some of those resources that we had talked about, from video blocks and graphic stock and audio blocks, those things can help you generate those assets that you would need during your post-production phase. And so
this is just a brief overview of some different, I'm mic'd up.
Sorry.
Some different resources for post-production that you should be aware of that are available to you on campus. So Smart Learning Commons, again, we primarily, actually, Charlie, you can mention Smart Learning Commons.
Yeah. I mean, there are a lot of resources, and this isn't the only one. But as I mentioned before, if you go to the Smart Learning Commons website, you can click on a link to get project help. That sets up an appointment with me, and I could help with any of the post-production topics that Jack talked about. In particular, coming out of the One Button Studio, if you produced all your assets in the controlled environment, I could help you maybe take out some ums or ahs, or certainly all the ums and ahs that I'm doing right now. Right? Getting a little, yeah. But that's what I wanted to. Also, you don't have to do post-production in a dark hole. We have the Smart Learning Commons. We have 4 iMacs in Walter Library. We have 3 in Wilson. And we have iMovie, Final Cut Pro, Adobe Premiere Pro, and some other tools that you might use for post-production.
Perfect, thank you. In addition to that, over at the Biomed Library, I'm mic'd up. We do have video editing software over at Biomed and over in St. Paul at McGraw Library. We do have video production workstations there. The support isn't necessarily on site as of now, but you can again make appointment with Charlie. So the libraries do have those are general, common use tools. In addition to that, we have lynda.com training tutorials. Again, OIT, strongly purchased. I strongly recommend you use them. They're fabulous. They're what I recommend when I develop guides for courses across campus. We mentioned earlier, vendors, print services is now getting into this game. Again, I don't know what their specifics are. We mentioned local media specialists like Pete, and then like, the College of Ed. There's a lot of other, or CCE, CLA. ATSS, if you're developing video content for your course, they resources on campus to help you get through your
More of what I what I just said. I think we've got that covered.
Great.
All right.
So then the very last step is just distribution. So that's when you hope that you're finished and you're ready to go, and you send it out to the world. So one of the biggest things, though, to think about, and this just kind of wraps it all up, we had this circle with the graphic. Distribution is, you want to think about distribution when you're in your pre-production phase, because without eyes seeing your product, you're not going to have the time and effort that you put into the product. It's not going to be fruitful. So always think about what you're going to do for your distribution while you're doing your pre-production. So up here, some of the things might apply more to videos that might be more for a marketing effort. But if you're really hoping to get your story out there and in front of as many eyeballs as possible, consider different ways of reaching people. So looking at some SEO, how could you give your video the best chance when there's so much noise out in public? So how can you really get it at the top of the list for search? get it in front of as many people as possible. Using social platforms to send it directly to your audience, and give them a little carrot or intrigue as to why to watch your video. And there's a few of the more traditional methods, like sending it out through email, which can still be a very successful way of reaching your audience, or embedding it into a website. Those four, I think, would be your four biggest areas to consider when it comes to distribution.
And so there are a few other considerations which we didn't really have time to talk about today, but I do want to mention certainly copyright, license, Creative Commons reuse. It sort of depends on how you're repurposing media. When we talk about copyright without permission, if it's not licensed content or Creative Commons, I don't want to dissuade you. The law does provide for transformative, limited transformative reuse of media for nonprofit educational environments. We saw a couple of examples in the student case, but there are some sensitivities, especially if they're not teaching, learning, research, or scholarship related, and you want to check with your departments on that. Attribution is really important, and this is different than copyright, but it oftentimes gets confused with copyright. But basically, anytime you're repurposing anything, and I even would go as far as saying licensed resources, you're going to want to, in your credits section, and there's not a standard guide, but a standard style, but you're going to want to at least.
You can use
say where you
APA.
got it. You can use APA.
Yeah, put
though.
APA.
I recommend it, but you're going to want to cite where you got that information from. And in the case of Creative Commons, it's actually you're now legally obliged to do so because you agreed under the license
Right.
that they have. Captioning we mentioned earlier, very important. And then this is sort of debatable. I don't know, but in my opinion, if you're going to have somebody on camera or you're going to be recording their voice, it's at a minimum of best practice to tell them that their comments are going to be public, like now. But in addition to that, you probably want to strongly consider getting a photo release for that person who's on camera. If this video is especially if this video is going to be publicly shared, or you think there's a possibility that this video might be shared in the future, even if it's not immediately distributed. That is my personal opinion, but not everybody necessarily shares the exact same.
Right. I tend to
Last
also
week.
subscribe to the idea of just may as well have everybody that's in your video sign a release form. The Office of General Counsel has release forms on their website. You
Yeah,
can
and
search it pretty easily.
But this isn't legal guidance, just to be clear. I'm not a lawyer. Talk to General Counsel.
That's right. So I've got a few resources. So the media resources handout, which I believe is something that Scott put together.
That's what I use for student courses, and on that guide, and I mentioned earlier, you'll find Emily Paul in the digital, the captioning resource, the captioning unit in the Disability Resources Center link on this page. But there's also a number of other resources that we mentioned that have links to them.
And then you've got our email addresses up here as well. So if anybody would like to contact us personally with a question or conversation, feel free. And we would love to hear any questions or more discussion as we go. Yeah, Emily.
I don't know if you'll know, but I came across the mistakes happen and how instructors learn from them. Do you know what the video series is for?
I haven't seen it, but
Because I was going to ask you, it's really well done, short and snappy, but there's still a fixed camera, and they put the speaker low, and then there's all this white space, and then they've inserted little animations over his head while he's
interesting.
And I wondered if that could have been in the button, because it's a fixed camera, and it was
Oh, right.
really clever. But it's out there. You know,
Should we look it up?
describe the person. It was somebody from CSE. Look at that, he's talking to Joe. Oh, he has glasses, someone holding a cup for,
We'll find it here. Yeah, we'll pull it up.
That's him. He's one of them. That was his name.
What do they call the series again, Emily?
It was called
Mistakes
Mistakes Happen.
Happen. Okay.
Series where they followed different faculty talking about how they learned from mistakes.
Yeah. Oh,
They're
interesting.
about 3 minutes long, and I just thought they were really fun.
Oh. Was this from was this produced by CEI? On
Okay.
their curriculum? Yeah, I consulted on that. Okay, cool. Yeah, very cool.
Anyway,
Oh, I want to see those.
So many years ago, I was teaching intro chemistry, about 100 students or so, mostly freshmen, science and engineering types, but there are lots of different intended majors. And about a month into the course, the student asked me if he could take the final on a different day from everyone else.
So I'm going to stop right here.
yeah.
That is animation. So that's a great example of, of using After Effects or some type of animation tool. It's not something that you can just start doing, and it's not something you could do in the one button. You would want to incorporate somebody who has experience doing animation and has experience doing editing. And so, yeah. Yep.
So on the immigrant stories website, they have a resource about how to make your own story.
Mm-hmm.
Do you guys have like a cheat sheet on how to make your own video, like a one pager that's really simple to share?
Well, the production support guide, but it's not a walkthrough. Well, yes, the CEHD digital storytelling guide is the one that you developed. Is the one that yours? Yes.
So long ago.
I have a link to it.
Yes, I believe we have a link to it.
You do have a link to it. Yes.
Yeah, I think we have a link to it.
It's brilliant.
Yep. Yeah.
With the YouTube channels that we have, so I have my YouTube channel, I have some videos up there, and then this woman's husband Googled her and found the video on my channel.
Right.
Is there a way to close that channel so it's just open to people with the link?
Yes. Yes. As a matter of fact, so the settings, there are 3 privacy settings in YouTube. There's the private, which means that anything that's listed as just private can only be viewed by you, the owner of the channel, and those that you share it with directly through YouTube, which is actually an internal process, which sometimes gets a little complicated. But and then there's a second level, which is called unlisted. And if you set everything to unlisted, then a general user should not be able to search and find that content.
Is there a way to do that at the channel level or just at the individual
Yep.
video level?
You do it channel and individual level.
I-
Right. But the Moodle course is only available to the students in the course, correct? Right.
Her partner still Googled and found that.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah, so the video, so when you embed videos, as long as it's set to unlisted, then only the person with the URL can access it. So your students who have access to it could take that video and send it to someone. So it's more of a security by obscurity. It's just a long digit, yep.
And this was the resource. I don't know why I forgot initially. Sorry, Pete, but this one's the one that popped into my head. But this is more of a, again, I think it works here perfectly for digital story. But it is a sort of a student presentation kind.
Yep.
Yes, it's on the handout.
I should probably disclaim that I put this together in 2009, and so some of the technology that's listed here is outdated. But in reality, the best low-cost video production machinery is this one right here. The cameras on these devices now surpass most of the consumer-grade camcorders on the market. And the beauty of it is that you can also be doing editing on here as well. You can even accessorize it with a microphone or lights or special lenses if you really want to get fancy. But it is pretty amazing how good of a video recording you can get with these devices.
So just to mention, ATSS, it's also on the handout, put out a nice tutorial on how to capture good quality video and audio using your own device. But to answer I'll leave it to Pete to, I don't know, answer your question regarding accessories.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that those accessories for mobile. Really, the best thing is to have a tripod mount. So if you want to use your phone for a camera, to find a mount, which you could buy a mount at Best Buy or at any National Camera. They're rather expensive, maybe $20 max, and it's just a little spring-loaded thing that holds your phone. And so there's any number of them. The brand that I like the best is called iStabilizer. They have any number of different devices with the mount, as well as they'll sell entire tripod kits. But I don't think that the lens accessories are really necessary. If that would be more of an experimentation. But you can get really nice microphones to use as well. And that's one area where I feel like that surpasses, that's one area where production quality really jumps up, is if you're doing an interview with somebody, to use an external microphone. And you can buy a little mic, like what Scott's wearing, a lavalier microphone, lapel microphone, that plugs directly into your phone, and you can get pretty good ones for about $40, $50.
And if this is going to be done by your department, now I don't recommend that every department go and develop its own media equipment and support pool. That's kind of why we have other resources on campus. It's part of why we're here too, because we don't want to see so much redundancy. We want to be good stewards of our resources. But if for a low barrier, a padcaster isn't a terrible idea.
Right,
for
some
a
of that-
tripod if you want to use
Yeah.
your iPad. If you're gonna have a lot of people in a department or a program, whatever, or even a Gorilla is another kind of tripod that you might want to consider. Padcaster's going to run you a little bit more, but that's going to allow you to repurpose a tablet or an iPad,
And
in my opinion.
what's interesting, earlier we were talking about lynda.com, and I don't know, does everybody pretty familiar with that resource? The beauty of that resource, of course, it's usually you pay to subscribe to it, and we did. The university paid to subscribe it, but we all have access to that now. And there are lots of great tutorials on there about using equipment, like I'm sure there's probably a whole course on using your iPhone for media production. So feel free to browse in there as well, and you probably can find a lot of great tips. Yeah. Okay. Correct. So that probably would be a great segue
yeah.
to maybe doing a tour, unless anybody else would like to chat a bit before we step out. Okay.
Check is in the mail. I mean, hopefully we didn't scare you. It's really not that. It's really not
Right.
that bad.
Yeah, so that may be something we explore in the future BCOP work as well. Because if there's a group of us trying to do this thing and we team up, and we can team up within our units as well, and then collectively think.
Well, and I'm sure we could even come back and do a hands-on kind of
We could
workshop.
do that.
A working session if you really want to do that. I know at least I and Charlie at a minimum would be interested, and probably Jack and Pete as well.
And we can't stress enough the idea that if you have even just the inkling of an idea and you want to sit down and talk to somebody, feel free to reach out. Because really, sometimes just sitting down and chatting over a cup of coffee or something is a great way to kind of get some ideas flowing. And with the feedback from folks like us, we'll more than happy to help you kind of bring that idea to the next level. Even if the next level is just writing it down, right? So.
I think that I want to stress that just our trying out these things are really important. And we can take on anything that we feel important, but ultimately I hope that we will also tell stories of equity and diversity in your units and across the university better using some of these tools. So first, before we take everybody, I wanted to thank you so much for doing this. This is very helpful.
Thank you.